Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching Big Picture with me, Vishal Dahiya, and in today's edition, we'll talk about the Afghan conundrum. Now, after a 5-month dispute over the vote, President Ashraf Ghani was declared winner in the presidential elections. However, hours after this announcement, Mr Ghani's leading challenger, Abdullah Abdullah, also declared himself the winner. Now, this dispute over the election results comes just after a breakthrough in the protracted negotiations between the United States of America and Taliban, in which both sides have arrived at a tightly choreographed peace plan. Now, the plan calls for a test period of violence reduction, which would lead to a deal between Taliban and Washington, followed by both Afghan sides sitting together to discuss the political future of the country. If successful, this deal will lead to withdrawal of American troops, bringing an end to their 18-year-long war in Afghanistan. However, experts point out that a political crisis in Kabul will weaken the Afghan government's hand in the negotiations and affect the overall peace plan. So what exactly is happening in Afghanistan and what is at stake for all those involved out there? For this, we have a distinguished panel of guests with us in the studio today. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Mr. D.P. Srivastava. We also have with us Mr. Alok Bansal, the Director of India Foundation, and Retired Major General Ashwani Kumar Siwach with us. Let me begin with you, Mr. Srivastava, and let's try and understand. There's a lot happening in Afghanistan at the same time, and it seems to be that all these events are pulling, the entire situation in different directions, although the aim is to go in one particular direction.
Well, we have to keep in mind two major strands. One is US electoral politics, which has determined the withdrawal schedule for President Trump, and that essentially means there will not be much change. The second is the negotiation process. Now, if the elections had been completed earlier and results declared, then the Afghan government would have had greater legitimacy and force to take part in in negotiation process and affect its conclusion. Now, the results of that negotiation process are a fait accompli, regardless of who is the winner of the presidential election. Now, if now there's a dispute also between the two candidates, which will further weaken the Afghan government's position as the days go by and they resume intra-Afghan negotiations. So, the first winner of this outcome, that is of the internal dispute and the sequence being first the negotiation and then the election result, are the Taliban.
Okay.
They come up with a stronger hand and their backer, which is Pakistan.
Okay, so the sequence itself does point out a lot. Mr. Bansal, if you look at not only the sequence, but if you also look at the way these things have happened and the decisions which have been taken, specifically in the negotiation out there, and as Mr. Srivastava is pointing out, vis-a-vis the government which is going to be in place in Kabul after these elections, from their perspective, it is a bit difficult out there to, negotiate.
And there is no doubt. In fact, after the last elections also, when there was a dispute like this, John Kerry had come and actually mediated between the two and come out with a solution which was unconstitutional, but nevertheless worked for 5 years.
The power sharing formula.
Where power sharing formula, where Abdullah Abdullah was appointed as the chief executive and Ashraf Ghani continued as the president. Firstly, now they have said they will not do. Secondly, at this point of time when US is negotiating with Taliban, giving that sort of leverage to US would weaken the Afghan government further. Having said that, the Taliban statement which came just I think yesterday or day before, where they said that they have reached a final negotiations and they are going to unravel the peace, they are going to roll out the peace plan, which will be announced very shortly publicly. I think it's not yet been announced, it's what the Taliban has given it. The significant part has been that in all these negotiations, Afghan government has been out till now. Now, a weakened Afghan government which lacks legitimacy will find it that much more difficult to get their pound of flesh or to insist on salient features, because Taliban has always been saying that this government is not legitimate. It's actually an American stooge. So for I think lasting peace in Afghanistan, you would want that the Afghan government is fairly strong and seen as legitimate by the masses. If that doesn't happen, any negotiated peace with Taliban will eventually transfer power to Taliban, and which could be catastrophic for not only for Afghan people but also for countries like India and the global community at large.
Okay, so it is indeed a very precarious situation out there. General Siwach, from your point of view, if you look at this entire situation, and as both the gentlemen are pointing out, that the government which is going to be in power in Kabul has to have interest, not only a legitimate interest, but also a legitimate place on the table out there when the negotiations happen. But this has not happened. The negotiations have happened between Taliban and the United States government, and after that, the political crisis also brewing up in Kabul.
Absolutely correct, Vishal. First of all, we must understand, so far Taliban is managing to delay it as much as possible. And in this interim period, Taliban has becoming stronger day by day. And it has almost have control in Afghanistan more than 40%. And therefore, Taliban is always thinking that it will able to negotiate on its own term. And once the government within Afghanistan is weak, that makes their work easier. So as on today, what is happening is that the president election, one saying that though it is announced but not accepted by Abdullah Abdullah. Now, as far as the elections are announced today, also the news is there that the election is said that Ashraf Ghani is a winner with 50.64% of vote, which is more than 9 lakhs, whereas Abdullah has got it less than 40%. But then Abdullah is not ready to accept it. And therefore, whatever negotiation they have, it will have a weak Afghan government. What new thing which has happened over a period of time now is, you have to see in this light, possibly see as far as Donald Trump is concerned, his poll promise was that he will like to withdraw from Afghanistan before the poll election. To me, it looks like that may not be totally possible. He may reduce the footprints in Afghanistan, may not completely withdraw it. It seemingly looks like that. Out of 13,000, possibly 50% or 40%, he'll keep it and rest he withdraw. Now, he has to sign sort of a agreement, then a deal. Agreement and a deal. Agreement is the one which is now going on, that they will have a violence level reduced for 7 days, possibly from 22nd February to 28th. And once Donald Trump goes from here, then some sort of deal will be signed between Taliban and Americans. Now, two things which are slightly favorable which is coming is, one is that Afghanistan government and US seemingly looks to be on the same page. That's what Ashraf Ghani has announced it. So that is a positive sign. So earlier there was a rift between that only.
Okay.
The negative side is that you cannot believe what Taliban says. Taliban is not ready to negotiate as Americans want. It does not want a complete ceasefire. It only wants a reduction. It is agreeing for reduction of violence for 7 days. And you sign a deal and then withdraw. Basically, they are insisting about withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan. And then the next step will be there, that they will promise that the Afghanistan territory cannot be used by any foreign terrorist to operate against any other country. Now, the issue which is coming is, this is the reduction of violence they are bringing it.
Okay.
But all said and done, let us take it positively. Some sort of package may be signed and reduction of violence take place for a week, and thereafter some sort of agreement signed which suits Afghanistan also, which suits America also, which suits Taliban also. Let's hopeful for that, but the only time will tell it.
Okay.
But what is happening as on today in Afghanistan between Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah Abdullah, that is possibly is making present Afghan government slightly on a weaker wicket.
Okay, there are two issues which you pointed out. Let me bring in Mr. Srivastava on those two specifically. One is in the present situation, it looks like Taliban ultimately will have some upper hand in this entire situation at the end of this all these negotiations and all this process which is going on. And second is how prudent it will be and how easy will it be for Washington to withdraw its troops from Afghanistan, something which President Trump wants to do, is a promise from him.
The first part, Taliban are so far united, but as you approach power, that is the time when the differences develop. And it's not a lost war. They have barely 40% of territory. The major part is still with the government. And there's a unified Afghan army. Unlike the political spectrum, the armed forces are unified, and actually they have been doing most of the fighting. So in case, if they remain united, Taliban will have a tough time. Now the second part, which is whether US can withdraw, it will not be easy, but they can, I think, given the electoral politics in US, they will withdraw. And as the time passes, they will lose leverage both with the government as well as with Taliban. The third thing which I may add here, when you talk of negotiations, if it's only a question of who will occupy the chair, that is easier part. But the Taliban have not accepted Afghan constitution. So the negotiations are going to be far more complicated than, people envisage. So I think given these three considerations, it's a very difficult situation, but it is possible to rally together the democratic forces in case it is Ghani and Abdullah come back together again.
Okay. Mr. Bansal, same thing in different perspective, and what Mr. Srivastava is pointing out, that it's not an easy negotiation, considering the fact that Taliban is, one, a very tricky side to negotiate with, and two, it does not, give legitimacy to the Afghan government and neither to the Afghan constitution.
See, there is no doubt that negotiations are going to be difficult since the details are not available, and US is bent upon withdrawing from Afghanistan. And this desire is stemmed more by domestic policies of the US than by prudent analysis of the situation in Afghanistan. Now, in that sort of a situation, Taliban knows what US wants to do. And Taliban earlier would also say that US may have the watches, but we have the time. So they know that they only have to delay the negotiations to force US to pull out. Now, in that sort of a situation, there is always this danger, which I feel that, and President Trump has given enough indications of that in his foreign policy dealings, be it with Ukraine or something, that for his electoral gains, he may just ask US troops to pack their bags and move.
So now the domestic politics will hold sway.
And that could be catastrophic actually for Afghanistan, because as it is, as I said, most of the Afghans don't want Taliban. There is a huge majority which doesn't want Taliban. People don't support it. But despite all this, if US pulls out tomorrow and you don't have a legitimate government in Kabul, you could see Taliban back in Kabul, and that could be disastrous. So I think the international community, and whereby I mean countries other than the US, should also step up their involvement with Afghanistan so that we can bolster the government and ensure that whatever negotiated settlement takes place with Taliban, it does not result in immediate change of power. And because any guarantee that is given by Taliban is not even worth the paper on which it is written. So, and who's negotiating on Taliban, on whose behalf? There is a huge question mark on everything. Mullah Biradar may have been number 2 at some stage. How is his equation with Akhundzada, Mullah Akhundzada is still not very clear. And all the people who are negotiating are the ones who were at some stage or the other in either in cohort with the ISI or were under the custody of ISI. The Biradar, as you know, was for a number of years under Pakistani custody. So the whole negotiations as they are taking place with a section of Taliban which is totally hand in glove with Pakistan's ISI. So lasting peace by Taliban negotiating with US is actually a pipe dream, because very often people don't look at the theological dimensions of this. And as I have repeatedly said, that the Taliban leader or Mullah Akhundzada is not only the leader of Taliban, but he is also Amirul Muminin for the jihad that is being waged by Al-Qaeda, and that jihad becomes delegitimized if Taliban actually comes to a negotiated settlement with US. Those who don't understand theology try to simplify it, but the fact is, if Taliban comes to a negotiated settlement with US, Al-Qaeda's jihad becomes delegitimized theologically. So Al-Qaeda would also try its level best that there is no lasting peace between Taliban and the West.
Between Taliban and the US and thereby in Afghanistan as well. So if that's the scenario, and as Mr. Bansal is pointing out, that the lasting peace in Afghanistan might be a pipe dream, but let's look at the Indian perspective here. If that's the situation, then General Siwach, from our angle, where we sit in India, how things should be and the situation as it is, how it might affect us in the near future.
Vishal, it is going to adversely affect us. We have been telling time and again that any negotiation which take place in Afghanistan should be Afghan-led, Afghan-controlled and Afghan-owned, which possibly not seemingly happening on the ground. Second thing, we have been time and again saying that as on today, the section of Taliban which is trying to negotiate, it is under the total influence of Pakistan. The moment Taliban comes into power in Afghanistan, it is as good as Pakistan now controlling Afghanistan. It takes its strategic depth as far as Afghanistan is concerned. And what happened is the Taliban fighters which are there are chances of they now coming toward Indian Kashmir. That is very much possible that those fighters which are Mujahid and all, there is chances of that they are coming toward our part of the J&K, and which can create a dangerous, and so is the Islamic State coming toward this side. Second thing is that we have got a large interest in Afghanistan. We are one of the largest regional donor of $3 billion. Imagine what all we have invested. We have invested in schools, we have invested in hospitals, we have built the Parliament House. We are the one which has constructed the road called Delaram, which is strategically important. We have taken this Chabar port with that premise in mind that through Afghanistan we will able to now approach Central Asian state. If Afghanistan is gone, or in the sense it is turmoil, it is under Taliban, which is under the influence of Pakistan, then whatever investment we have done in Chabar to some extent nullify. Okay. So we will like that in Afghanistan, a government which comes into power should be the one which is sensible enough. It should not be totally controlled by Taliban and controlled thereafter indirectly by Pakistan. That is our biggest worry. Because remember that in Chabar, the investment which we are doing it, we are going to construct a road which is now, you remember what is happening, that Americans have also given us a written undertaking that Chabar will not come under CAATSA, countering America's interest through Sanction Act. And they say you keep on building this port and it start operating by the Indians. And a lot of transshipment of wheat and have gone. Okay. So therefore, we are also constructing a road from the railway line which is there from Chabar to Jeddah, and then connecting it toward Afghanistan. It is our future plan. I am saying the plan is such that in case if the government in Afghanistan of Taliban comes, it will hurt our interest. And okay. Also in Taliban, whatever we have invested will also have adverse impact.
Okay. Ambassador Srivastava, from Indian perspective, these 2 points which, General Siwach is pointing out, not only from the security point of view, but also from the economic point of view, it is not going to be in our best interest if Taliban ultimately has that upper hand in Kabul, be it in terms of being the, controlling part of the government or having some influence over the government in Kabul.
I think economics is secondary, and it will remain secondary for a long time to come, because Afghanistan is a war-torn country. So you are not going to get any returns on your investment. That is also not what we want.
Regional security is priority.
We want stability. Now, the current situation actually reminds me of what happened in the 90s, what General was saying earlier. That is, once Taliban gained the upper hand in Afghanistan, it allowed Pakistan to divert the Mujahideens to Kashmir. And if we do not want a repeat of that history, and we are still living with the consequences, then this is a time for Government of India to step forward and support the Afghan government. And it is possible to, maintain the balance because you still have a fighting Afghan army, which has given an excellent record. But in case it is delayed and the political wranglings demoralizes the army 6 months down the line, maybe you will not have that option.
Okay.
So the time to act is now.
Okay, not only for India, but the other players, key players, international players here, as well as Mr. Bansal was pointing on. Mr. Bansal, from India's specific perspective, things as they are and what they might become, our interests, how they need to be protected.
See, the situation as it is developing is extremely dangerous for India. We need to understand 2 or 3 things. Firstly, any negotiated peace which US is working out, as it appears today, seems virtually to be handing over power to Taliban.
Yeah.
Immediately or maybe after a little bit of time. Now, Taliban and Kabul has a problem. Please understand, all those who are fighting for Taliban, be they Taliban fighters or sympathizers who are actually fighting in Afghanistan, will not start plowing the fields just because US has come and negotiated deal with them. They would only move to a different arena. And that arena is going to be, in all certainty, is going to be Indian territory. Yeah. So we have to be worried. The second part which we need to understand is that Taliban's ideology is not confined. It's not an insular ideology. It's not going to be confined to the geographical frontiers of Afghanistan. They'll try and propagate their extremist worldview across the frontiers, into Central Asia, into Pakistan, into India. The country which are going to be affected, one of them is India. As far as economics is concerned, we are hugely problematic. Despite Katsa and all, I am not very optimistic about Chabahar. I have gone to Iran and I have seen that despite being on Katsa, the sanctions have actually prevented Chabahar from attaining its full potential. But the fact is that if Afghanistan falls to Taliban, we have a huge problem in our hand, and we have to start looking for accessing Central Asia through some alternative routes. So, a falling of this sort of negotiated deal which actually hands over power to Taliban and Kabul is extremely dangerous. Irrespective of what we tell President Trump or his administration, I don't think so they will take into account our concerns. Though many in US Department of Defense have earlier told that withdrawal from Afghanistan could be catastrophic. But President Trump in this election year, I think, is keen that he pulls out US troops from there, because this election is going to be a tough election and going to be keenly contested because he's already faced impeachment and all those things. So, since this was one of his electoral promises that I'll get our troops back, he's going to insist on that. And in that sort of a thing, our aim should be to strengthen the government, but I think Indian government is rightly waiting and watch. We will not start providing military hardware because we feel as of now it's NATO's responsibility and they should fulfill it. As far as training etc. is concerned, we are doing it. And I have no doubt that Afghan security forces, which include Afghan National Army and Afghan police, have given a good account of themselves. Okay. But please remember, in Afghanistan, power has changed because people have crossed over. Afghans are very fickle-minded. If they feel that the other side is winning, it doesn't take too long for them to switch chairs. And that is where American presence was important, because Americans were not really fighting much, but their presence was giving a pretense of permanence to the government, and that was keeping the people with the government. Because if you look how Najibullah fell or how Taliban came to power subsequently, all these have been because key commanders switched sides. Okay. So that has to be prevented.
Okay, that is something which needs to be kept an eye on. So concluding comments from you, General Siwach, on the way India needs to go ahead and respond in this particular situation.
Vishal, we have to be very alert. My point is, first of all, we have told the American authority that your complete withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan will not be the interest neither of yours nor in the interest of the region, because there will be instability which will come in, and this will be maximum made use of by Pakistan. We are also saying that you have a problem in Iran, the Middle East is also not stabilized. So kindly do not take out everything out of Afghanistan. A vacuum will be created and Taliban will be a government which will create a problem for complete region, especially for India. And we are concerned are very genuine. One is economic, second is the security. Security is the main thing where, you know, Taliban can come this side. The second thing which we are trying to convey is that should the writing on the wall is so clear and you look as if Taliban is going to come in power and Americans are going to withdraw, what may come.
Okay.
In spite of the security conditions wanting differently, Trump has got a political promise and he has to withdraw before November 2020. Then what are we watching for?
Okay.
Then we start taking some step. My point is, one step can be then whosoever comes in power there, maybe Taliban, then open some sort of underhand, you know, channel, backroot channel must be opened. You know, we should be alive to the latest situation rather than waiting for the situation to happen. That also we need to do.
Okay.
As on today, we are supporting the Afghanistan government very well. Militarily, we are giving them a military hardware also, we are training them also, but everything will change once the Taliban if come into power.
Okay.
Therefore, to us, what is important is, if we think the writing on the wall is very clear and Americans are going to withdraw, what may come, then let's be practical and trying to also evolve a strategy by backdoor diplomacy to try to be relevant in Afghanistan.
Okay, so the relevance in Afghanistan for us is also equally important. As our panelists are pointing out, it's a very peculiar situation in our neighborhood, the Afghan theatre. It's a situation of conundrum, definitely, wherein all the players are trying to ensure that they stay relevant. And the most important aspect here is for the Afghan government's legitimacy to be intact and to ensure that Taliban does not end up having an upper hand. All this from India's perspective. Let's wait and watch as to what happens there. We'll keep you updated on all the developments and we'll come back again tomorrow with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.